floor to Shilan from Centre Zagros pour les droits de l'homme from the Kurdistan.
Yeah. So I come to you today as a Kurdish woman and hopefully someone who can give voice to over 40 millions of Kurds around the world who lack official voices in their government. Before addressing the present situation, it is important to trace history, since problems do not arise out of nowhere but are rooted in the past. Established in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the Medes, ancient ancestors of the Kurds, belong to the family of Indo-European people. Between the 16th and the 19th century, we were more or less autonomous after the Turkish victory of the Shah of Iran, for which Kurdish princes guarded the borders of the Ottoman Empire. However, before the end of World War I, France and the United Kingdoms put an end to our dream of independence. In 1916, the Franco-British secret agreements concluded between diplomats Sykes and Picot, working towards the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire, which from the beginning of the war was on the Central Empire's side. After the war, the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, was signed by France, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Ottoman Empire, was supposed to dismantle this empire for the benefit of its neighbors. This treaty also advocated the creation of an independent Kurdish state. But 3 years later, in Lausanne in 1923, everything was shut down. The Treaty of Lausanne erased the promises of the Treaty of Sèvres, dividing the Middle East into several countries for the colonial benefits. So our natural rights to an independent state was denied once again. The United Kingdoms and France got mandates of the new states born after the war. The first one is on Iraq and Palestine, the second on Syria and Lebanon, and they didn't take us people in consideration. They didn't respect our rights. They didn't think about the minorities. So in 1925, the Kurdish province of Mosul, very rich in oil, was included within Iraq and placed under the British mandate. Greater Kurdistan was then divided into 4 states, in Turkey, in Iran, Syria, and Iraq. To this day, over 40 million Kurds remain divided across these countries, with lots of Kurdish parties who are seeking full independence or are working to an autonomy to control their own affairs. In Turkey, or what I would call Northern Kurdistan, Kurds represent 25% of the whole Turkish population, and the denial of our identity has been relentless. These problems have a history traced into the Dersim massacre, which took place in 1938, and runs up to the 1990s, where the Turkish military destroyed more than 4,000 villages. Since the 1980s, there is an armed struggle between the guerrillas of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, called PKK, and the Turkish army. As a result, the Kurdish region of Turkey has a state of emergency with a high degree of political oppression. The worst time for this was in the 90s, when Turkish state used death squads to kill thousands of Kurdish activists, politicians, artists, and guerrilla sympathizers. Tens of thousands of Kurds were also arrested and tortured, or kidnapped and never came back. In June 2015, the pro-Kurdish party, Democratic People Party, HDP, won 13% of the seats in the parliament. Once again, the Turkish government jailed both of the party's male and female co-leaders, Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdag, and shut down thousands of the party's offices. Despite these repressions, the HDP still won the representation in the latest Turkish parliament, and hopefully is an example of how the conflict can be peacefully resolved. Another issue is the fact that the leader of PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, is in jail for 20 years now, since 1999, on an island in a prison called Imrai. And lots of Kurds see him as a leader or as a pioneer for change, progressive change, because he also gave lots of rights to women. And like Nelson Mandela, who himself was kept in prison on an island by South African apartheid, the Turkish government will likely have to find a peaceful agreement with him in order to progress all together. Actually, this is my hope. Meanwhile, in Iran, or what I would call Eastern Kurdistan, which is home for 10 million Kurds, they took the same path as Turkey. They deny our rights, our language, and they are very brutal when it comes to us. They do a lot of public executions where they display the bodies of most of the time Kurdish activists to discourage the people to go against the government. And as a consequence, several political parties have risen up to fight the government based in Tehran. However, it was historically the first time Kurdistan was a country in 1946, where our leader, Qazi Muhammad, was hanged after a short period of time for working and representing Kurdistan as a country. In Iraq, in northern Iraq, or southern Kurdistan, Mustafa Barzani obtained recognition for our autonomy in armed insurrection in 1974. Kurds there represent 20% of the population, around 5 million people. And during this campaign, the Kurdish city of Halabja was famously gassed in 1988 by Saddam Hussein, killing 5,000 people, and the photos of dead children lying on the street shocked the global community. However, those were just a small amount over the 180,000 Kurds who would be killed by Saddam's government, as the Kurds of northern Iraq demanded more rights. After the first Gulf War, Kurds were protected by a US no-fly zone, and after the second Gulf War, the Kurds largely got autonomy of their areas. In 2005, Iraqi constitution even granted us autonomy and the future right to a referendum to vote for our independence, which we tried to do last year in 2017, but the consequence of that were that our airports were blocked for like 5 months or more, and Iran invaded the Kurdish oil city Kirkuk and put an end to our dreams of independence. In Syria, Western Kurdistan, 3 million people live in an area called Rojava, which means Western Kurdish. As a result of the war in 2011, the Kurds led by PYD party and their armed wings, YPG and YPJ, gotten global attention for their defeat of the so-called Islamic State. In particular, the Battle of the City in Kobani received global attention. And which is very interesting because it's the first time that people really admire the Kurds for the fact that women and men fight together against the Islamic State. And it's a very feminist and progressive movement as women take their arms and participate in the fight for freedom and for their own rights, which should be equal. The PYD has also received assistance from the United States, which has arranged angered the government of Turkey. More recently, to stop the growth of Rojava, the Turkish army invaded Syria and captured the Kurdish city of Afrin, which angered many Kurds around the world, as we felt like the Western world betrayed us by allowing Turkey to use some of the same Islamic State fighters who the world claimed were enemies of humanity in the first place, to help Turkey to take over a Kurdish city. Now, what we all of these 4 regions display is the need for a resolution to the Kurdish question. Over 40 million of people in the world should have the same rights as everyone else. To those are to speak their own language, practice their own culture, and live a free life from oppression and abuse. While many Kurdish groups currently have taken up arms against the government they believe are occupying them, it is my hope that eventually a peaceful resolution can be reached, where both sides can put down their arms, recognizing the legitimate rights of the Kurdish people, and live together in peace. Thank you.